Hi everybody, welcome to the channel. I'm Jim. It's a snowy day here. It's snowing a lot more than I thought it was going to snow today, but it's very atmospheric. I want to pick up where we left off on our Great Ideas Today series. I haven't done one of these episodes in a while. We are up to the year 1969, so we're finishing up the 60s here. These volumes were published by Encyclopedia Britannica as supplements to the Great Books of the Western World set. I am lucky enough to have a complete run of these Great Ideas volumes, which ran from, I think, 1961. Let me check. Yes, 1961 to 1998. And we're finishing up the 60s here. And I'm currently reading the 1971 volume, so these walkthroughs are now catching up soon to where I'm at in my reading of these volumes consecutively. Anyway, I want to show you the contents of what's inside here. We'll talk about all the momentous changes that were going on in the 60s. What were these Great Ideas Today volumes all about? They are really include overviews of developments in the arts and sciences and humanities over the course of the last year. So you had a lot of discussion of recent thinkers and recent books published. There's also symposiums on a topic of interest that's very timely. There's updates to the great ideas, and then they supplement with shorter works that are additions to the Great Books Library. So let's see what's inside 1969 without further ado. 1969. Well, you know, in 1968, there was a lot of stuff going on in the West that was hitting the fan. Let's see what this frontispiece lithograph is. Rudolf Ackermann's lithograph of Corpus Christi College and Christ Church Cathedral from his History of the University of Oxford, published in 1814. I have no idea what that's doing in here, but let's find out. Maybe there's a theme. I read this volume several years ago, so I'm a little fuzzy about what's inside. Well, okay, yes. So the theme for this year is the University Today. And Part two, that's part one. Part two is developments in arts and sciences with feature articles on schooling and education, philosophy of science, technology and values. Part three, the contemporary status of a great idea, the idea of God and the difficulties of atheism, and then some Great Books Library editions. So let's see what we got here. We got an introduction. I always love looking at the photographs in here. So we have a setup. And then we start with a piece by Clark Kerr, born in Stony Creek, Pennsylvania. A.B. degree from Swarthmore College. I used to teach just down the road from Swarthmore, like 5 minutes away. Studied at London School of Economics, Institute of International Relations, and a very full resume. And the theme of this piece is the pluralistic university in the pluralistic society. And we start with a stark lead. The university in America is under attack. The attacks come from several directions, from those who look back to former days, from those who want new directions entirely, from those who accept the university of today but want better service from it. A more fundamental reevaluation of the university is going on now than ever before in our history. So I guess he's talking here about the support for more research in the modern university. We've got subsections on returning to a golden age. Flying the flag of dissent. Good photo. With the caption, even the partisan university may have its occasional and temporary place in acting against a clearly oppressive regime. Contemporary students, take note. Serving the special interests, the intricate web of functions, the functioning of the functions. Okay, let's move on. So we're going to have a set of articles about universities here. Edward H. Levi. Edward Hirsch Levi was born in Chicago, product of the University of Chicago and Yale, assistant professor of law at University of Chicago, amongst other credits. The university as custodian of reason. Again, whoever chose the photography for these volumes, I think, did a great job. Like, this is during a time where there were sit-ins and young people were storming the barricades and breaching the walls of academe and demanding changes. Oh, and here's our old friend Noam Chomsky, born in Philadelphia, of course, the world-famous linguist and political activist. And he writes an article on the function of the university in a time of crisis. So it's nice to see Chomsky represented. The university is a legitimate target for protest. Exactly. These photos really tell the story as to what was going on in the West in the late 60s. It was a time of torment, protest, crisis, change. And that's being reflected in the pages of the 1969 volume. Here's John R. Seeley, The University as Slaughterhouse. So what they're trying to give you here is a range of perspectives on education and university schooling. A virtual debate. And here is Mortimer J. Adler weighing in with a catechism for our times. 7 questions to which all of us, young and old, should have answers. Let's see what his questions are. Do these still have weight? By what standard can we judge the relative merits of different centuries, societies, and cultures? 2. What should government do in shaping the political, economic, and social institutes of a society to safeguard and facilitate the pursuit of happiness by all its people? 3. In what ways does the culture of a society, especially the value system that underlines its mores, encourage or discourage the individual in his efforts to make a good life for himself? 4. Is this, our century, a good time to be alive? 5. Is the United States today in the forefront of the 20th century revolution? 6. Is ours a sick society? Yes. Curably or incurably sick? 7. Do we need a moral and an educational revolution? So he takes each question and gives a response. Okay, that's so much for part 1. Part 2 is going to be about the year's developments in the arts and sciences. So let's see what they focused on in 1969. John Goodlad, schooling and education. So we're maintaining the education theme this year. The Education Decade, a brief overview. School curricula at all levels must become more relevant to the lives of the students. The Changing American School. Interesting caption here. The prison-like structures of generations past are gradually being replaced by colorful, airy buildings, some of which feature large open spaces under domed roofs, and what Harold Gorries of the Ford Foundation's educational facilities laboratories referred to as snap-on walls. Let me pause here for a second and talk about that, because in my schooling, I went to a traditional grade school. We call it elementary school, grade school, for kindergarten through 6th grade. And I probably was built in the 1950s. And it's very, very, very familiar looking type of building. And then I was born at the very tail end of the baby boom, or at the beginning of Gen X. I think I identify much more with Gen X. I was born in 64, which is usually people put that still within the baby boom frame, but it was, later in 64. And I just feel a lot more, I'm like bleeding edge Gen X, or somewhere, kind of in between the Gen X and baby boomer. But I mention this because with my generation, my year, I think it was my year or the year before, the baby boom demographic was like going through the public schools. So when enrollment was beginning to drop, so they must have had 6, 7, 8 elementary schools in my school district. We had 2 junior high schools and 1 high school. And by the time I was going in the 7th grade, they didn't need as many elementary schools, so they were starting to downsize. So it was the newest elementary school in the district was known as, they called it Brown School. And it was made on one of these models, like they're talking about here, with the more open design and the sort of snap-on walls. So, and in the middle of this school was like the library, but it was like organized into pods. I'm not doing a very good job of describing it, but it was it had to have been built in the late 60s or the 70s. And anyway, so by the time I got to 7th grade, Brown School was shut down as an elementary school, and they put all the 7th graders in, I think from the 7th graders that would go to both junior highs, for some reason they packed them all into this Brown School, so the whole school was just 7th graders. Well, let me tell you what a bad idea that is. Oh my God, what a horror show. You're just, okay, you've all been through that probably, you know what 7th grade is like, middle school age. Well, the whole school was packed with 7th graders. and we were always getting into trouble. And I mean, even and I was like kind of a good kid, I was getting detentions. People were just out of control, and the format of the classrooms was just conducive to like this wildness. I mean, I just remember kids like running in circles all around this brown school, like, and like throwing books, and it was like juvenile delinquency on steroids, and the architecture of the school did not help that. And then you could hear what was going on in the next class because of these like fake walls, and it was a pretty badly designed school. But I have very vivid memories of Brown School. And then after that 7th grade only, then we got moved to our respective junior high schools for 8th and 9th grade. And then my high school was 10 through 12. But I would imagine by this point that high school is probably 9 through 12. And eventually Brown School was I don't think that experiment with the 7th graders went too well. So pretty soon after that, they just sent everybody to the junior high schools. Probably the enrollment permitted that because the numbers just keep getting lower and lower as you get into Gen X. But anyway, that caption really reminded me of that. What a bad idea that school design was. And eventually they sold that school off, and now I think it's like assisted living facility or something like that. That's what we call a digression. Okay, damage and deprivation experienced before entrance to school are difficult to overcome. Head Start has been an amazing demonstration in human engineering. I've heard mostly good things about Head Start. I don't know if that's still the case, but I think they did a lot of good work. Educational science, some relish in the opportunity to respond to classmates. This is a long article by John Goodlad. This picture reminds me of Brown School too. You see that open format? Yeah. Sometimes I think the students need a few more walls. Okay, so much for that article. Healthy bibliography there. On to Herbert Feigl, The Philosophy of Science. Okay. Causality, regularity, and necessity. Monument to Sir Isaac Newton. Conditionals, dispositions, and levels of explanation. Necessity, possibility, and impossibility. Confirmation, induction, and probability. So Herbert Feigl's really into triplets. Indeterminism or absolute change in 20th century science. There's Einstein with that hair. Yeah, I have a lot of hair days like he did. Okay, and then we move on to John Burke, Technology and Values. I have a vague memory of reading this one, and I thought it was a good one. Technological innovation and social change. Progress. The human environment. There's a Gustave Doré engraving. Ludgate Hill, London, 1872. Makes me think of the Victorian history book I read last year. And then we move on to, looks like a photo essay, The American Environment, with a quote from Robert Kennedy, 1967. He didn't have much longer to live. He would be assassinated in 1968. So environmental concerns coming to the fore in the late 60s. I think I know right where this is. This is in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and I think that airplane, it was like a restaurant, and it's probably still there. This is in Lower Bucks County, Pennsylvania, Route 413. Okay. Values and decisions. And that's it for that article. Part 3, the contemporary status of a great idea. So these are like taking one of the 102 great ideas and giving you an updated look at it. So here we're talking about the idea of God and the difficulties of atheism. Etienne Gilson, or Gilson, professor of the Collège de France. Is God dead? Ethical atheism. Lots of talk about Nietzsche here. Casual atheism. What the atheists call God. Scientific atheism. The true problem, the idea of God. There's Augustine's being checked in with here. Proletarian atheism. Karl Marx comes up. Aquinas, the core of the problem. Is the non-existence of God truly thinkable? The cause of the idea. I see Aristotle and Kant being discussed. So this is, a lot of philosophy being thrown in their way. Theology, the first word. And so ends this part 3. And then lastly, we're going to go on to part 4, the Great Books Library. So let's see what they added. These tend to be either excerpts or shorter works that are supplements to your 54 volume Great Books of the Western World set. Mark Van Doren, Great Books of the 20th Century in Literature. So is he making a list here? Or what? Let's see what this is about. Mark Twain and Sholem Aleichem. Ibsen, Shaw, and Chekhov. Lyric poetry. Emily Dickinson, Thomas Hardy, Yeats. All heavy hitters. Edward Arlington Robinson, Robert Frost, T.S. Eliot. So these are like, I think, maybe they're already starting to think about a new edition of the Great Books of the Western World. And here's what from the 20th century Mark Van Doren thinks should be considered. Short story artists like Guy de Maupassant, Chekhov, Henry James, Rudyard Kipling, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, H.G. Wells, Isaac Dinesen, Ernest Hemingway, Ring Lardner, James Thurber. Then we get on to James Joyce. He's given his own section. Marcel Proust, my man. He's covered here. Thomas Mann, another great author. Faulkner, another heavyweight. Kafka, Camus, and Orwell. Like almost all these authors have fared very well. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, maybe not as widely read as he was back in the day. Okay, so that's more of like an article about what the Great Books of the 20th century would look like. But what are the additions to the Great Books Library? Okay, so we go with Anselm of Canterbury, Proslogion with a reply on behalf of the fool by Gaunilo and the author's reply. So Anselm of Canterbury, you're getting here into some medieval writing. And I think I've mentioned it before, and other booktubers and writers have mentioned, the Great Books of the Western World sets by Britannica are a little lean on the Middle Ages. So it's nice to see them rectifying that by including Anselm. It's not a super long work. And then we go with the idea of the university in the 19th century. So in keeping with our university theme, Humboldt and Newman and Mill. All right, so Wilhelm von Humboldt on the organization of institutions of higher learning in Berlin. The idea of a university by John Henry Newman. And inaugural address at St. Andrews by John Stuart Mill. And what else do we have? All right, Friedrich Schiller, translated by Samuel Taylor Coleridge, the great British romantic poet and critic. The Piccolomini, Part 1 of Wallenstein, a drama in 2 parts. So this is Friedrich Schiller. A work I do not know much about at all. So even though I read the first several parts of this 1969 volume, on all these volumes, I've been skipping over the supplements. I'm meaning to go back to these another day. And I think part 2 is published in the 1970 volume. So you can see this is like verse drama, I guess. Let me know if you're familiar with this work. That's going to round it out. Okay. Thanks for being patient as I walk through the great ideas 1969, and I walk through some memory lanes of my educational background. Education and universities were a major topic under discussion in this particular volume, probably because there was so much social unrest centered around university protests in 1968, which is, and even before that, but you know, around the time this volume would be getting prepared, like that was on people's minds. So the last of the 1960s volumes. So we've done 1961 through 1969. Obviously, next up will be 1970. Not sure when we'll get to it, but eventually I'll come across that. And yeah, we'll march forward into the 1970s. Let me know your thoughts about the Great Ideas Today series. Do you recall reading any of these? Did you have favorite pieces in here? Any comments or questions about it? As always, feel free to weigh in the comment section. I always appreciate you watching. Great to hear your feedback, and I hope to see you again very soon. Bye-bye.